Got it. Everybody, we are live streaming, and it says meeting is now live streaming on Facebook, and I am resuming.
Perfect. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's installment of Ask Me Anything, Bonobo Network's increasingly occasional interview series where we talk with fascinating tech culture creators. My name is William Winters. I'm the founder of Bonobo Network and co-producer along with the illustrious Mischa Byruck of And today I am excited to be in conversation with the similar Mischa Byruck. Mischa, welcome to this meeting.
Thanks. It's awesome to be here, William.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Mischa is a men's integrity coach with Evolve.Men is his business. And Mischa has also been working pretty closely with Bonobo, supporting our work in the last 6 months or so. And Mischa will be leading a couple of really awesome workshops coming up very soon. We'll lead a very awesome workshop and supporting us with another coming up very soon. So excited to talk with you, Mischa, about all of that. If you have questions you'd like to ask Mischa, you can drop them into the chat of the Zoom, where we'll sort of be monitoring and looking out for your questions. The last 15 minutes in particular will be reserved for questions, but if you have a great question, drop it in and we'll get to it as we can. Same thing goes if you are watching this on Facebook Live. Okay, so Mischa.
You didn't give me any questions in advance, by the way, so I have no idea what's coming.
Oh, yeah, boy, I am.
It was just fine.
So Mischa, how would you describe your work in the world?
So I support men to prevent and then repair sexual harm. I'm pretty specific on that.
Yeah, like I'm curious about what that looks like on both the prevention front on the one hand and on the repair front on the other hand.
Totally. Oh, there's so much. And I mean, I think it's on the prevention front, so much of it looks like challenging the stories that we were all taught about sexual entitlement and the entitlement we feel to other people's bodies. So much of the harm that I deal with isn't what is normally thought of as sexual assault or sexual violation, but rather, are we getting some feedback? Is that just me?
There's someone who's not muted.
Please mute yourself. Yeah, it's maybe inadvertent boundary crossings, which a lot of men haven't been taught to prevent. They haven't taught themselves or been taught how to prevent the kinds of harm that they don't even know they're doing. And so a lot of what I do with my client work and in my workshops is frankly a process of awakening men to the to all the unspoken dynamics and all the ways that they and we as men are often being coddled by the women in our lives and not told about the harm that we're doing. I mean, we are often so often shielded from the harm that we do. And that's getting less and less true as Me Too takes hold in our society and culture, but still is really, really true. And I mean, I've worked one-on-one with over 50, maybe 60 clients now in in-depth 10 to 20 session engagements, and almost never did they really grasp that they'd done harm when they did it. They had to be made aware of it afterwards. And almost never did they understand the extent of the harm until it was made abundantly clear, either by the person they harmed or by the kinds of empathy exercises we do. So I'm trying to help bridge that insanely large gap between what we're noticing and what we're actually doing in the world, and
Yeah, for sure.
especially around sex, frankly.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean that makes so much sense. I mean, one of the things that I think about like you're talking about like teaching men just like how to be aware of the harm they're doing in the world is all of the ways that we are often trained, particularly those of us who are like cis hetero men, to like elide, avoid, you know, obfuscate, just like avoid by like any means necessary and possible, um, like awareness of that harm. Like it's almost like our sort of ability to empathize, our ability to like be curious about someone else's experience beyond our own is
Yeah,
stunted.
for sure. Yeah, for sure. I often note a a real evidence of the absence of, not the absence of empathy, but the unwillingness to acknowledge the degree to which we have the capacity to harm, given the reality of patriarchy, especially if we're really woke men who really think that we're feminists and really, 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 really don't want to harm. Like
Right.
most of the time, it's really easy to believe, like, as long as we don't mean to, as long as we're going into every interaction with nothing but good intentions and nothing but like love in our hearts, that we could possibly do the kinds of insanely traumatizing, years long recovery type style harm that we can.
Yeah.
And I'm not an explicitly religious person, but the word that I often come to at some point in my client work is reverence. Like I think that we should be approaching, even, and frankly, especially in radically sex positive spaces, all of our interactions with so much more reverence than I think is normal or easy when we're focused on, you know, especially if we're focused on consent and desire and negotiation. Like there needs to be a true level of reverence for just the incredible trust that's happening even in a play party hookup, or a kink dynamic, like where there's so much trust, even if it all feels quite casual and quite free and loving. And yeah, I also think, honestly, William, that there's this stuff, like talking about harm as like part of the first sentence when you talk about play feels almost weird. Like I think a lot of people just would feel a lot more comfortable avoiding the topic entirely until something bad happens. And I think I think it's really, really important to talk about harm in the very same breath always that we talk about liberation, and that we talk about freedom and joy and pleasure. I just I really don't see any other way to do. You know what I mean? Like there's a big issue with ISTA right now blowing up, and
And
I,
what's this stuff for our guests?
what the International School of Temple Arts is having a really big Me Too moment right now, and there's a lot there to talk about, and I don't have so much insider information except to have been witnessing what other people are saying about this program. But one of the things is that they're talking about deep sexual liberation and running huge sexual liberation workshops across the world, dozens and dozens of them every year, involving hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. And nowhere on their website is like an entire section devoted to like harm and how we mitigate it and like how we navigate it. Like that's just not a place on their website. It's the weirdest thing. It's like, why wouldn't that, given the massive prevalence of sexual harm? And I'm not talking about breaking laws right now. I'm just talking about harm. I'm just talking about treating other people with care if they feel harmed, and maybe not having that happen so much. And it seems strange to me that we in the sexual community wouldn't be way at the forefront of that. And it's one of the reasons I love Bonobo Network so much, because you all are. You're often sought after, right? For the rules of engagement and the way you engage with harm, and it's not like an afterthought. And I love that about your organization.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Um,
We're getting questions. I'm seeing the chat happen.
yeah, I mean, so there was someone asks, can you give examples? And yes, can you give some examples of how men conscious sexual and consent culture play out
I couldn't hear
these
you. I'm gonna
dynamics? Sorry.
of how.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
can you give examples of how people play out some of the
Why?
dynamics
Yeah,
that
yes, I
we're talking about?
can. So a really good example would be a kind of inadvertent gaslighting with NVC, where the pre-negotiated thing is not to have penetrative sex. Lots of flirting and rubbing happen, and that's all delightful. And then he still puts himself inside of her. And that is obviously a violation of the pre-agreed upon thing. It is a violation in both the legal and the interpersonal sense. And then afterwards, it can feel it essentially takes on the elements of a strange gaslighting when the focus of the post conversation where she says, hey, you violated me, or hey, like that wasn't okay, is greeted with a lot of deflection, minimization. Oh, but you were so into it, or oh, but like I felt it was okay because you orgasmed, or oh, I felt it was okay because you were making happy noises, and none of that matters at all. But like, because the focus of the man goes there into the deflection and minimization, and because it's being that deflection and minimization, which is frankly a classic technique across all types of men, is being done with the modern woke spiritual language, especially NVC language, where he's like, I'm happy to hear you, but still like not actually taking accountability for having done the violation. Like, thank you, like I'm hearing you, but not actually owning the thing that happened. It can create both the same severance from reality that it feels after a much more blatant violation. So that's a good example. In other words, we use NVC to cover up the fact that we're still doing the same shit that like drunk college guys are doing. That's one example. Another example is something that I'm certainly guilty of if I'm not really careful, which is love bombing. Like taking a single interaction and adding the energetic elements to indicate romantic interest when there's actually not really romantic interest, or when, right, so that there's a heart opening out of integrity, right? People, and this is one of the things that people in ISTA have complained about, right? That like you use a technique that you've learned, right, as a man, that like creates a lot of heart opening, maybe eye gazing, maybe like a deep penetrative technique with your hands that like creates a lot of opening, both emotional and romantic opening. Maybe you're even using words and language to express like a deep romantic availability that you're like, okay, done. That was a cool hookup. Peace. Like, I'm patting myself on the back because I gave her a bunch of orgasms, and she's sitting there being like, wait a second, that feels really emotionally manipulative. I just felt like a deep emotional opening. You clearly led me to believe that with all the eye gazing and all the romantic talk and speaking of love, and then you just opened me up, and now you're just going to drop me. It doesn't matter if it's not technically sexual assault. Like, I don't care what the state says. It's harmful. It's harmful. Thousands of women are telling us it's harmful, and yet we keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, so, yeah, I'm curious, like, uh, when, like the drive to like behave in these ways, or the tendency to behave in these ways, like, comes from like a pretty deep place in people, like so how do you then correct that? Like, what are some of the strategies strategy that you work with your clients to, like be, as your website says, like better men.
Totally. There's a number of different ways to basically get really used to the reality that you can cause harm, such that you, when you encounter the reality that you've caused harm, you react well. So much of the harm that we do comes from after we've done the thing, right? I'm going to quote your partner, Mischa Bonaventura. It's not what you did, it's what you did after, right? So much it's like, hey, that was a violating thing. And if the guy says, wow, you're right, I did it, I completely own it. I completely see your harm. I'm here for it. And I'm here to like make sure that I don't do it again. That's a completely different, right? Like that alone requires a huge amount of skill, just doing that. And it requires practice and it requires empathy, right? Like a lot of times there's huge numbers, as you were talking about, in terms of the way that we were raised as men, blocks to simply owning what someone told you did, right? Like the litigious society, the argumentative debate society influence holds that like, no, you're a sovereign individual and she's a sovereign individual and her perspective is just her perspective and that might be Cartman victim triangle, blah blah blah, and like I have a right to my experience and my experience was that I did no harm. Let's have a debate. That shit is terrible. It is, and that even that is harmful. I'll go further. It's not just bad communication strategy. It's bad. It's harmful to like take that stance. So like a big part of the skill is really frankly rejecting the stance that you can debate whether or not someone who is telling you that you harmed them is harmed. Like, stop debating that. Like that alone is a skill. Please, it's definitely something we work on. Some other skills are power awareness, like being able to like off the top of your head name all the power dynamics that are at play in any given situation, right? Especially if they involve you, right? I'm talking about socioeconomic and racial and gender, but also physical size and also something like social, like you talk a lot about in your work, William, rank, right? Like being able to name like I know everybody at this party. This is a party at my house. Like most of these guys are my friend. Like that's power, like maybe this person is visiting from out of town. They don't know a lot of people. Maybe they're, I had a client who, one of the, someone came over to stay at his co-op and he slept with her, and afterwards she was like, I felt really really violated by that because I didn't feel like I had a choice. I'm from out of town. I don't have a lot of money. Like I couldn't not be here. Like, so you were forcing me to acquiesce to sex in order to get a place to stay for the night in a foreign city, right? That was a power dynamic that didn't even occur to him when he was seducing her. Didn't even occur, right? Yeah. So like awareness of power dynamics is a concrete skill. Right? I like to say to my clients, William, like the soft skills are the hard skills.
Sure.
Like
I mean, there's
awareness of power dynamic is a hard skill.
Yeah.
Like I know it's called a soft skill, but it's like, no, this is actually a hard skill. And another one, a huge area, one that we're actually going to get into in the workshops that I'm going to be developing for Bonobo in part, are apology skills. Doing a restoration of integrity, which is a practice founded by the Reverend Bridge Feltus, who's one of my mentors at the Heal Thyself initiative, part of the Remember Institute. Apology practice and accountability practice, which is totally inspired by the Bay Area Transformative Justice Collective and the work of Mia Mingus, as well as restorative justice practitioners like Danielle Surred at Common Justice in Brooklyn. Like there are scientists of apologies and like ways to do it well and ways to restore integrity well and to do repair well. All of these are like really concrete skills. And a lot of it does involve like some level of crossing the Rubicon into which you like, I'm just a guy who, all that matters is intentions, to, wow, like I have a humility and a reverence for my capacity to do harm inadvertently. And if you like this person over here can enter into a play party relatively safely, because even if they fuck up, they'll be able to do the repair and own it well. This person is a danger.
Yeah. So like you ever get the sense, this is something I've done accountability work with other folks, and even as I think about like my own like sort of past behavior, like I sometimes get the sense that like people will like lean particularly hard on the like unintentional piece, like on the bit like, oh, like it's unintentional, as though it like provides some degree like extra level of like moral cleanness or space or whatever that is like distinct from
Yeah.
a sort of like appreciation of the the harm and doing the hard work of like really sort of, as Eve Ensler or V, puts it,
Mhm.
like really like letting your heart break and opening yourself to feel what the people you felt, and sitting with the pain and suffering that caused, like it's just like a little like responsibility to
Mhm.
watch. Do you find that to be true ever, or like
Oh, of
like
course.
I wonder about the, yeah, go on.
No, of course. Thank you for that question. I mean, I think our attachment to our own intention is a very human thing. It's a very normal thing. It's certainly not gendered, you know. I've certainly seen people do harm
Cool,
who
cool.
do not identify as men who fall back on
Mhm.
intention. Um,
Totally, absolutely.
so like I find it very human. And again, like you asked about skills, right? And I really like to make this stuff as concrete and skill based as possible. I don't think that this should be an area that relies on anything squishy or superstitious. I believe that that it is a skill that can be learned and taught by anyone, including very neurodivergent men, whom many are my clients, right? Like to transcend the focus on impact. Like I don't necessarily. I mean, I can make a philosophical and
You mean the focus on intention?
so what did I say? Intention. Yes. Sorry.
Yeah. You said
Right.
transcend
The
the focus
focus
on
on intention.
impact,
Right.
which I
So
think
like
is what we want to
yes.
focus on.
All right. Go back. Go back, Risha. The focus on impact is all that matters. The focus on intention is very human and natural, and it's a skill to transfer from intention to impact. And I can make a philosophical argument against why you should not focus on intention. But the strongest to me is that like experientially, you'll notice that the fact of your good intention doesn't mitigate the harm. Like if you simply listen to the people who tell you, the fact that you didn't try to hurt them actually doesn't do that much for them. If they let you anywhere near them, like if this is the thing at like a play party and in an intimate community like Bonobo, like we all assume that you're not trying to hurt each other. Like if you're trying, like it's like obviously table stakes are that we're not proactively trying to do harm with each other. I mean, it seems like when you look at it that way, it's such a morally bankrupt place to even begin. Well, I wasn't maliciously trying to assault you. Like, of course you weren't. Like, why would that even cross your mind that we would think that? and and when you think about it like that, that's helpful. That can be helpful. Yeah, and I love the Eve Ensler letting your heart break open. Um, some folks, I really actually, William, if are you still there? I didn't even know if you're still here. You disappeared. I wondered maybe if, oh, look, I think you've left. So while William gets back on, I'm gonna just say thank you all for all of your comments. I'm gonna try to go through some of these and answer the questions you've already put in here. Um,
Hey Mischa, it's Mischa. I can also support if if you need help. I just jumped on.
Yeah, cool. Hi, Misha. Thank you. Yeah, feel free to put yourself on video or whatever. And I'm going through some questions, I think, from Emily. I would love to hear you talk about the dynamic of scoffing at other men's behavior when one feels one is more woke or aware than they are, the distancing of assuming at least I'm not that bad when someone may still have a lot of work to do. And also how that doesn't actually do the work or bring everyone along to feel better than. Yeah. Well, let me just start with myself and say, even as I am potentially cavalier with this stuff or take it as and do it full time as a practice, I am not immune to any of the dynamics that I'm talking about. I am of that. There, but for the grace of God, go I. And sometimes I simply go there. I do harm all the time and I try to mitigate it. And and I have all sorts of systems in place to keep, including my sobriety, to keep my practice and my space clean, to use a phrase from the founder of Landmark, keeping your space clean. But like the holier than thou, or the better than thou dynamic that Emily's talking about is, I think, so critical, because it's really what let me answer that, Emily, in a roundabout way, which is that when I tell people what I do, if they're a woman, right, and I'm using these terms as to include anybody who identifies as a woman, and really in this case anybody who doesn't identify as a man, but let's just say for now, if they're a woman, welcome back, William. I'm answering some of the questions from the chat.
Thank you.
So if they're a woman, they say, wow, that's important work, and almost every man I know could use that. If I meet men, what they say is, wow, that's important work for other men. Right? So there's this weird disconnect that I experience. Oh, sorry, go ahead, William.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry. Go on.
No, it's okay. Anyway, there's this weird disconnect that I experience because I started this work in part as a response to the fact that, like, Me Too was happening in my communities. I really thought that I was woke. I thought that I was in this kind of safe place where people weren't as, where we weren't as problematic as the people across the hall, or in other communities that revolved around bars or nightclubs and scenes that I thought, I was better than, or that I transcended in some way, because, we dance and are free, and men hug each other here and say, I love you. And we have cuddle parties, or we do like different drugs and alcohol, whatever. Like, no, turns out that, like, in fact, one of the ways that I phrase it, Emily, to my clients, especially, most of them do come from backgrounds of alternative communities. A lot of them are in the burner communities, in sex positive communities, in kink communities, event planners, etc. Is that the more, quote, woke, I really don't often use that term, but let's just for now, since you use it in your question, the more woke you are, the more dangerous you are, because people are more inclined to trust you, and you're more likely to have the kind of language that will allow you to mask your own harm to yourself and others. I think anybody who has any kind of a dance practice, or thinks of a meditation practice, or an anti-racism practice, or an activism practice, should simultaneously, and this, by the way, is not my idea, like, plenty of restorative justice and transformative justice practitioners have been shouting this from the rooftops, but anybody who thinks that they're a do-gooder in the world should start with their own practice of mitigating their own harm, and have a deep practice of integrity and accountability for themselves in the world. I don't know if that answered your question. But I'm grateful for all these lovely comments. William, is it okay?
Mischa, would you be willing to re-add my pin? And also
Yes.
make me co-host again?
Yes, sorry, I'm making you co-host. I forgot. Thank you for that. And now you can do it, I think.
Okay, great, wonderful, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
You want me to pin you?
No, I got it. Cool. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry for the interruption.
Can I answer some of these? We've got a lot of cool questions, William. Can I just answer some?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Please.
All right. This one is the next one I'm seeing. I'd love to hear you talk about how men can help / hold other men accountable for harm. Yeah. Well, the first step would be to do it at all. I mean, at this point, it's not really so much of a like technique question as it is it happening even in the slightest, like even in any kind of like at all. And in my experience, often not, right? Like, but let's just start, right? Like, so one way would be simply to generally speaking, especially if you're not skilled at it, and frankly, even if you are, like, don't do, like, I don't actually tend to like intervention type dynamics, like when a group of men get together, especially not as a first intervention or first attempt. Any kind of public thing, even if it's like in front of one other person, anytime there's a witness for an interaction, you're bringing in like a bunch of different dynamics that aren't necessary at first. You really want to minimize the inevitable defensiveness and deflection, and have a one-on-one with your boy, like a one-on-one with your boy, where you say, hey, I've noticed some kind of harmful dynamic going on that I'm witnessing or I'm hearing about, right? And that alone will give you a sense of how open they are to exploring it, right? I'm just going to say right now, I've lost friendships because I've initiated these conversations with men who didn't want to hear it, right? And I might still work with them as a client, but like I can't really be friends with someone who doesn't want to hear about their own harm, who isn't interested, who's like, yeah, I'm not open to that. Like, no, just no, right? And like, so like it was a deep piece of clarity for me. But like the men that I want around me are men who, if I said, hey, like I'm a little worried that you are causing harm, would be like, thank you so much for telling me. I'm interested in hearing more about that. Like that's like a litmus test for me now for male friends, it's frankly a litmus test for me for all friends, but most of the women I know would have that. They might have some resistance, but they'd ultimately be interested. I know that's a very gendered assumption, and like I have friends who are non-binary and are not men or women, but like since we're using these genders, I just wanted to name it like that. The other thing is like I've noticed like the thing that gets men in my office in my practice tends to be some form of consequence, either a very stern talking to, usually frankly by either like a woman or a series of call outs or call ins, or some form of like, oh, I didn't get invited to the party, or I got disinvited to the festival. Like that's enough to get people to drop the money and like actually invest in doing a bunch of feminist reading and worksheets and exercises and like uncovering all this stuff and building all the skills I've been talking about. So some form of consequence, even if that consequence means like I didn't get invited to go on the dudes hike, So that's also really, really helpful. But on a very real level, like men, I don't think men can hold other men accountable if they don't see the harm themselves and are just doing it as like a favor for women. Like if the ultimate energy of a man-on-man interaction is, listen, man, she's telling me you did something bad. I don't really think it's that big a deal, but like maybe you should like clean it up because like it's getting hard for me to be your friend because it's like a bad look for me. That's not an effective energy. That's like more collusion and more gaslighting of the person. In fact, it's more harm. I think I've taught this for years and years. Like you've got to care about this stuff as a man enough so that it's actually like you're actually offended when someone does something sexist, or that you're actually offended. And it's hard because a lot of times like I've got such a thick skin as a man that like I'm like, oh, not really offensive to me, shit, or like that doesn't seem like that big a deal. You've got to really believe in the person saying this was harmful. So I'm going to stop there just so I can get to some other questions, Danielle, but thank you for that question. William, I'm kind of on a roll here. Do you want to jump in or something?
Yeah, I mean, so I was hoping before like going full tilt on the audience questions, to talk a little bit about the workshop that you have coming up with Bonobo.
Thank you for that.
And yeah, for sure. So it's called Rolling Out the Red Carpet for No.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a I feel like it's just like a really essential attitude for doing consent well, whether you're like out in the world or in a bonobo environment or other sex positive or similar community. Tell us what that's about.
Yeah. Rolling out the red carpet for no to me feels like the next step beyond consent culture. And I want to be careful here because anytime it's like I'm advancing some sort of ideology or set of ideas as if they were my own, I really want to, it's important to my practice to be really explicit that like this is an idea that I coined, but that is very much based on the ideas of many people, mostly women and people of color, who have been thinking and talking about these ideas for a lot longer than me. And frankly, who bear the brunt of the kinds of violence and trauma that it's a reaction to. But if we've all learned that no means no, and then we all learned that yes means yes, that's all well and good, but we're still in the paradigm, right? And again, I'm going to use the masculine to feminine, and frankly, I'm going to use the man and woman dynamic of pursuit and acquiescence, because I just see it represented so often in our culture, and certainly within my clients, and echoed in the experiences of so many people again and again and again. So I'm going to use that as an example. But we're still ultimately saying and reinforcing with our current consent paradigm that sex is a commodity that women have and men get. And that the only thing that we're doing with consent culture is throwing up more elaborate obstacles to men getting it. So the paradigm is it might be right. It's important for me to like get past this hurdle that she really says yes, and says the word yes, and I hear the word yes, or I have to get past, right? But I'm still ultimately oriented towards getting the thing. And that's still the goal. And all that consent culture has done is throw more obstacles in the way of that. And I'm trying to say, let's throw out the culture and throw out the paradigm in which sex is a commodity, and the goal here is to get it. And instead hold that the goal should be attunement. That an encounter is successful when both people feel really attuned to, and everybody walks away happy, no matter what happened. This is very confronting for men because it seems at first blush to deny the reality of their desire and go towards some sort of castrating, self-denying perspective, which is very challenging because, we have our testosterone fueled sex drives, God bless us. However, it does not do that. What it instead invites us to do is simultaneously hold desire without agenda. Curiosity, not ambition. And that's very challenging, right? You mentioned skills. This is a skill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Right? And one of the best ways to do it, and I'm going to give this as a preview, right? Sneak preview of the content of next week's course, is simply to observe that you yourself have an agenda, right? I've been flirting with this woman. I really want to get with her. If she were to say, hey, just to let you know, any kind of erotic energy exchange is off the table, would I still be hanging out with her?
Mm-hmm.
Something to check in on, right? That's a good litmus test. Another good litmus test is to say, am I interested in going really slowly? Am I willing, right? I'm not making any judgments here. I'm just inviting the observation, right? Because to allow desire, to really be there without agenda, it's just such a nuanced thing. And what it may lead to is slower encounters where less boxes are ticked of different sexual acts, but it will lead to inevitably so much more attunement. And right when we're saying no, when I go to a play party, my goal is not to get with people. My goal is to have interactions in which people walk away feeling happy, always. And there's also a part of this that extends to community, to the responsibility that we have within community to enliven the community with our interactions rather than extract from the community in this transactional, let me go and get that sex. And I swear to God, no matter how woke you are as a man, that thing of just going and getting for it, no matter what she's really wanting, is there. It's in you. It's in me. And it's just so important that we develop the skill of noticing it in us and maybe quieting that part of us that wants to just get with her and steamroll over the subtle no's, the hesitancy. And I really mean subtle too. So much of subtlety is right. It's not a particularly subtle ask to say, if she says the word no, please don't do it. Right. But what I'm talking about with subtle is where you were really pushy at dinner 3 hours before, you know? And she kind of let you go ahead and select the menu and select the restaurant and select everything and kind of push, even though maybe she was a little quiet, you know? Or maybe like, because you're insisting on paying everything, the energy that you've entered into this interaction with has some context of like, well, I've paid for everything. Now at the end of the night, it's sex time.
Mhm.
You know, I'm talking about like sensing into her enthusiasm on a very, very subtle level, regardless of how much yes or no words she says. I'm talking about energetic attunement. And even sensing into phrases that don't scream yes, but that might be a demonstration of, well, I guess I'm expected to say yes, so I'm now going to essentially go along with it because I can feel the intensity of his desire for me and his sense of expectation that that's the direction that we're going. A recent example that I came across was a woman who said to the man who had been flirting with her all weekend, I told my friends that I was likely going to fuck you. Right? That might seem like a come on, even a flirtatious one if you're looking for sex, but from the outside, if you're looking through it, looking at that interaction from a more rolling out the red carpet for no perspective, there's no agency there and there's no desire either, you know? So
Yeah,
I'm
I mean,
talking about subtlety.
it sounds a little bit like I mean, it's interesting because it sounds like it could have notes of resignation, which is what it sounds like you're speaking to here.
Mhm.
Um, and I know that like ambivalence is like a very real part of
Yeah.
like many of our like cycles of desire and figuring out like, oh, do we want to do a thing, like maybe yes, maybe no, sure, why not, and I'm
Sure.
curious, like if you are if you are a man who is like newly engaging with this consent as collaboration sort of like rubric or
Totally.
framework. Um, consent being like an ongoing collaboration,
Yeah.
as we define in Bonobo. Then
Sure.
what's like a pro tip for encountering and like interrogating, even like noticing, like ambivalence and like what
Hmm.
to do with that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm going to sound like every sex columnist ever, but like slowing down.
Mhm,
I mean, and it sounds so silly, and or not so silly. Silly is the wrong word, but it sounds so simple or basic even. And it can be misleading when, especially in a really heightened sensory environment where you're like being like you're remembering something about collaboration as you're making out with someone on a couch and next to like a foursome with like full penetration happening literally next to you. You know what I mean? Like it's really hard to remember that like every interaction is playing by its own set of like unique rules and context is everything. And like, so that I think slowing down so that you're at the pace of feeling 100% confident of everybody's enthusiasm for whatever's happening is and again, like people often ask me about ambivalence, right? And like maybe, well, but if I was just tuning into ambivalence, like no sex would even happen. And I'm like, great. Like if you're having partners who with you who are consistently ambivalent, then maybe you shouldn't be having as much sex. Like, stop, just stop. Like good, like less sex for you. And also, like such a weird thing. Yeah, like like air, please, God, like I don't know, like I know that I'm looking at this from the side of like seeing all the harm, but like
mhm.
when like that one little hookup at that party led to a year or 3 years of cancellation for you as a man, I really think it's worth it to really wait till you're 100% sure. Rachel Lark has a whole song about this, her magnum opus. It's like a 10-minute long
Yeah,
song
totally.
just about this, right? Where it's just like,
Well,
unless she's literally climbing on you and like really, really pushing you, clearly, energetically in your body, you're just obvious. She's obviously, yeah, like just don't do it. Don't do anything. In fact, proactively slow it down. Right. And a lot of the comments in this thread, as well as the comments on my various posts in Mighty over the last 2 weeks, have been about the transcendent power, especially, and again, I'm going to use this gendered framework, and I don't want to do what Michael Morgenstern calls Shiva Shaktiing, right? We came up with this term together. It's like putting everybody in the world in this like everybody's a straight man or woman box, and it's really important to me not to do that. And I gotta say, like, the power and transformative healing power of simply being the person who's like clearly has the door has been opened to erotic connection to you for whatever reason, maybe, right? And to be the person to be in a man's position and say, actually, I'd really like to slow this down, or like, hey, I'd like to take penetrative sex off the table tonight, or can we do a check-in first for a second? I just like to make sure, like, I'm not getting a full yes from you, or hey, like that felt weird. Like, can we do a little cleanup? Like I'm noticing something. It's so rare that it's kind of mind blowing. It's like one of the things I remind my clients of, William, and my students, is that like just being men in this world, we've been gifted with the transformative power to be healing just by not being the assholes we're being expected to be, or the extractive people that we're. Assholes is too pejorative, right? Like even the wokest of us, when women sleep with us, are expecting us to be extractive and selfish, and they're doing it anyway, because they love us. Isn't that wonderful? And they're turned on by us. But like it's transformative to flip the script in that way, and what a wonderful thing. And there's likely more trust, and more joyful interactions, and certainly hotter interactions when there's that trust. If you're spending a lot of your hookup wondering if she's a yes, then she's a no. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, ambivalence to me is a red flag, frankly. If there's that much ambivalence, it means that the thing should be slowed. And even if that means that, like, actually she's like, well, no, I really was ambivalent, and like I probably would have been a yes, then I'd rather err on the side of not traumatizing you. And I'd rather my clients do too. Even if that means that we slow down more than you might have, turns out, wanted, then I hope that everybody learned from that, and that we can be deeper with our yeses and nos.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'll get intense about this. I feel like I was kind of screaming at you there. Is that sorry?
No, here.
All right, we've got so many cool questions. This is awesome.
Yeah. I think let's maybe like jump back. So I lost the chat, unfortunately. When
I totally have it. It's okay if I
and so if there are some questions.
Yeah, give me a second, please. And actually, Mischa, is Mischa still there? If Mischa is still there, maybe you can select some, Mischa, so I'm not like spending too much time reading.
Hi, yeah, I'm here. I also didn't get the chat before I got here, so you have more questions than I do.
All right. What are some of the most memorable rejections given or received that you have experienced or your attendees have shared? Totally. I'll give one from a recent play party. I was hooking up with a woman who had this exciting strap on, and she was really excited to use it with another woman. So I went out to the party and I talked to this woman, and I was like, are you interested in this? And she was like, absolutely. Right. And energetically, I was kind of like, oh yeah, and I get to be part of this. Right. And then she turned to me and she was like, just so you know, you're just watching. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. You know what I mean? Because it was like, this often happens in play environments where like a third person or an extra person comes in, and because you're already a part of the existing dynamic, you assume that you're also invited. right? And I saw that part of myself being just like a Sue, and she just made it clear. Like I would have checked in probably, before that happened, but she just made it real clear, and it was really sweet. And but it was clearly rejection. It was like, you're not part of this, you get to watch. It was like, and it was really sweet and wonderful. And you know what? I did. And like a little part of me was like, oh, I'm rejected. But like then I watched, and it was lovely to just sit and observe and witness. And I like was kind of accessing that part of myself that could be like a really giving witness, right? And just put my energy towards the hotness that they were creating together. And later she thanked me for the energy of witnessing that I was offering. That like she was like, that was just a lovely witnessing and a lovely way of accepting the rejection that I'd had. That was just a recent one. Boy, I don't know if I want to share my client stories right now.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah, I think it's good to be cautious about
yeah,
that.
I don't want to share individual people's stories, but there is a thing about rejection that like I just wanted to name, which is that if you're doing your job right, then like a lot of the time, like you should be able to sense into whether or not there's a yes there that's enthusiastic. And if in the case that I like I just shared, where I hadn't read the room quite right, or she hadn't given me a clear signal or whatever, a no does come, then it should be just greeted with joy, right? And part of the rolling out the red carpet for the no practice is like, cool, right? It's not a like tolerant no, right? Like I think so much
celebrating the no.
It's a celebration of no. And I mean, I think Bonobo teaches that and says, thank you for taking care of yourself. That's a great practice. A lot of what I teach is like a deepening into like where that gratitude really is coming from, rather than just a rote phrase, right? Of like, let's get deeper into like all the ways that you can actually source gratitude authentically in this experience, in this moment right now. And I think on the loose site, I don't know if I'm even pronouncing your name right. I think you're the one who runs the rejection practice. I'm excited to experience that with you, and I know that that's happening. So please feel free in the chat here for everybody to link to that or whatever. Trish asks, what is women's role in this? What could we do to support our male friends, partners, lovers? I want to be cautious by saying that I really, really do believe that a lot of this is men's work to do. I think it's, in the same way that I think anti-racism is not on Black people to like tell white people, I think it's white people's work to, to confront our own white supremacy and racism. And if you are inclined as a woman to help a man with this, I think nothing gets a man to like really look at this better than a stern talking to from a woman, especially one that he was trying to hook up with. It is, you have the ability, ladies, to transform men by like really telling them the thing that you have insulated them from for most of their lives. All the consequences that they never even knew about, all the really small harms and bigger harms, all the stuff that you've just insulated us from because you can't trust us. Like if you are willing to take that risk, especially in these communities where trust is there, and take us aside one-on-one and just be like, here's all the ways that created harm, and there's work that you can do. You can direct them to me. You can direct them to William. He also has a practice who does, in private practice for this kind of work. And we will support them, framing it as a skill rather than a character defect. Please don't use phrases like narcissist, sociopath, abuser. Like that's not what we're talking about at all in this conversation. Like those are real things and I respect the shit out of them, but like that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about patriarchal conditioning and good men who want to shift.
Yeah. Can I just add there, Mischa, that like I do think that like, I mean, going back to the example of anti-Blackness and white supremacy, I mean, I do think that like there are ways that like, part of the work of anti-racism is like Black folks like examining where anti-Blackness lives within us, like sort of like as individuals, and then also like the ways that plays out in the institutions that we're part of and like have.
Yeah. William, I think, just got cut off again, but when he comes back, I'll make sure to support him to finish that thought. In the meantime, I'm gonna keep going.
Still on like Oh yeah.
Sorry, William, you just got cut off, sir. Can you repeat what you just said?
Oh. Oh yeah. What I was saying is that in way
Oh, it's happening again.
folks' participation in like creating nature is I don't know. Wow. Cool. How about now?
Better.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, so what I was saying is that there are like the ways that, like for Black folks who are like trying to participate in anti-racist like movements and spaces, examining the ways that anti-Blackness lives within us, manifests within the institutions that we're a part of, et cetera, et cetera. Like I imagine there's a fairly similar role for women in examining the ways that like patriarchal norms and such like sort of get internalized in the ways
Totally.
that those might, sort of play out,
Yeah, I
in
mean,
society as well. Yeah.
okay, like, sorry, not to interrupt you, but like, not for nothing. Like, please don't pressure men to have sex. Like, please don't do this in reverse. Like, that's weird, awful. Like, I do hear about that. Like, that is a thing. Please don't do that. Like, please, like, please don't insult men's manhood if they don't want to hook up or have sex. Like, please don't assume that, like, because you've been told that men always want sex, that there must be something wrong with you, and then guilt trip them if they don't want to have sex with you. Like, please honor our agency in the same way. I just honestly, all of that's valid, William. I just tend to, like, in these types of contexts, I tend to de-emphasize it because it does feel like such a space that, and I appreciate Trish's question. Like, it's true, but like, honestly, please don't shame us when we express, the vulnerability of maybe not conforming to what is expected of a man in patriarchal culture. Like greeting male vulnerability with shame in the same way that Brene Brown talked about is harmful, right? For instance, Brene Brown talks about this great anecdote of, at one of her conferences, a man came up to her and was like, "That's all well and good, whatever you just said, Brene, but my family would rather see me die up on my high horse than fall off of it." Accepting male fragility and vulnerability is important. And again, there's a great New York Times article about petulant vulnerability and the way that men manipulate the again, wokeness, right? It's like, I've got the ability to be vulnerable, let me find a way to be vulnerable in a way that's actually manipulating this woman into sex. And I just see that so many times, and it's such a bigger problem in my mind than like women shaming men for not being sexual. I really don't see that, especially in our communities. I just yeah.
Sure. I mean, totally. Yeah, we can talk about this more offline.
Yeah, no, it's real though.
examples.
I mean, I'm sure you could. I didn't want to dismiss what you're saying.
Totally. So I want to I'm noticing that we're like just about at time. We're like at the hour.
I can go longer. I mean, we've got so many questions here. I don't want to take up your time, but I'm happy to.
I would like to respect the time of our viewers, and I think that if folks haven't yet gotten their questions asked and answered, then it's entirely possible that they might want to check out your workshop for
Totally. Yeah,
more.
I respect that. Okay. Gosh, I was so excited to answer these questions.
Oh yeah, is there you want to maybe pick one to go out on?
Gosh. Yeah. How much practice do you find people need on average to get comfortable giving and receiving no? I about 10 hours, roughly. I think a lot of it is not about the no. Honestly, like that's why what I do in my your ability to receive a no really, really well, like gorgeously, as well as like restore integrity after harm, I think is all tied together. And I think a lot of that has to do with what I do in my private practice, which is build up the skills around power awareness, empathy, dismantling your unconscious biases and cultural conditioning. All of that plays in, you know? And energetically, it's the difference between tolerating a no, you know, or even receiving it relatively well, but still energetically being graspy, hungry, ghosty, manipulative, etc. Right? Like I think the no is the tip of the iceberg. I think being rejected well is a part of a much broader practice that I summarize as an integrity and accountability practice that has to do with your own values, that has to do with like understanding how you want to show up in the world, that we can't just reduce any of this work to just the individual practice, which I know is not what we're doing. And I'm glad that the practices are happening, especially around rejection, which is a really potent one. But that's what I think it takes. I don't think it's just about practicing the actual rejection. Okay,
Cool.
so I'm going to respect
then-
your wishes there.
Well, so last question, and this is a take on the question that we always close out on. Mischa actually asked it at the very end here. What is like one or two like resources that you would recommend for people to learn more about like this work to go deeper if you're like a neophyte?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Well, I think the if you're really looking to like shift perspective or like get an understanding, especially as a man, but really as anybody, but frankly, especially as a man, of like what people are talking about when they talk about rape culture, I recommend Rebecca Solnit's A Brief History of Silence, which is from her collection of Mother of All Silences. It's one of the most powerful essays and pieces of writing around the underlying dynamics of harm that we're talking about here. I think it's like, again, like I think it's really, really important that we acknowledge that especially for someone socialized as male who hasn't experienced sexual violence as a victim, it's just really hard to wrap your head around the reality of this stuff and around the reality of the trauma and harm. It's really easy to be like, that doesn't seem like that big a deal, right? Which itself is really harmful. Like it's just, you know, so like one of the things I do with my clients is I assign them essays, and that's one of the essays that I've assigned in the past, and it's been really powerful. Oh gosh, there's a few others. There's an incredible essay in terms of creating empathy called Cat Person, but I think Kristen Rupenian, that's incredible and is being part of a collection of essays. The other two authors that I think are probably some of the, like there's two or three authors that I think are like probably my biggest current contemporary thought leader, like heroes right now. And that's Amiya Srinivasan, Christina Emba, and Adrienne Marie Brown. And they're just light years ahead of everybody else in terms of like thinking critically about this as a practice. Christina Emba literally made a call for a practice like rolling out the red carpet for the no in the Washington Post and the New York Times in the last month. Amiya Srinivasan writes frequently for the New York Times. She's a philosophy professor at Oxford. She wrote a book called The Right to Sex, I think is being analyzed by the Bonobo Network right now in their book group. There's a huge amount of like really beautiful, eloquent, contemporary thought on this that is not man-hating. I mean, I guess technically it exists in the feminist milieu, but like is really encouraging for like a sex positive future.
Sure.
And I'm just really deeply inspired by those writers.
Have you checked out The Apology by V, formerly Evensler?
No, I've heard about it though. No, I haven't gone there yet.
Yeah, incredible. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we will leave it there for now. Mischa, thank you so much. This has been such a wonderful conversation, and bonobos and other viewers, you can check out Mischa Byruck in his workshop, rolling out the red carpet for No. When's that happening and what time?
It's next Tuesday, August 9th, 6 to 9 p.m. Pacific. And I will link it.
Happening.
I'm now going to do the awkward thing of finding a link and putting it in the Zoom chat. There it is. So you can get your tickets there. And if you don't make it, if you can't make it to that, there's going to be others. Yes, a short history of science. Thanks for that. Yeah, it's good. There's going to be other workshops, and this individual workshop will likely be repeated.
Yep.
So there will be other opportunities, but
Sure.
I hope you come, and yeah, and you can find me also at www.evolve.men if you know of folks who might benefit from speaking with me. And then listen, I'm going to keep this text. There was a lot of really engaging questions that we didn't get to. And I might just do some sort of a response on my Facebook page or something that allows me to answer some more.
That's great.
They're pretty juicy. And anyway, I want to like also respect folks' time.
Wonderful, Mischa. Thank you.
No, it's
so
my
much.
pleasure. I love talking about this. Thank you so much for offering the space, William. Truly, like I'm deeply honored to be working with you.
All right. Okay. Look out for the next exciting installment of Ask Me Anything. And if you're watching and you're not yet a Bonobo Network member, you can learn more about us by visiting Bonobo, Bonobo network.com. And if you like what you see, you can apply for membership on that website. Okay.
Please do.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
All right. So Mischa, could you stop the
Yeah.
well, I'll stop the recording and maybe you stop the Facebook Live broadcast.
Yeah, let me just figure out how to do that. I've got too many tabs open. But
Okay,
yes.
got it. Okay.
Let's see.
I think I think you can do it.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Yeah. Once you stop broadcasting on Facebook, maybe folks can come off of mute and say